Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world in 30 answers. Discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Allison Levine, and today I'm sitting out looking at the vineyards at Left Coast Estate here in the Willamette Valley in Oregon. And I'm sitting with winemaker Joe Wright. And Joe, thank you for joining us today. And tell me a little bit about where exactly we are and about Left Coast Estate.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for all of it. This is fun. It's good to see you again. So, Left Coast Estate sits actually in the Duzer Corridor in the Willamette Valley, and we're directly about 45 miles west of the Pacific Ocean. And so quite inland and quite hot during the days, but as a result of being in the corridor, we get really cool evenings and big shifts in temperature. Today's 85, 86 degrees out in the vineyard, and it will get down to about 42 degrees tonight. Oh. As a result, we get a lot of hang time and some great flavor development.
Real diurnal shift there. Mm-hmm. So how many acres of land are you working with, and how many cases of wine do you produce?
Left Coast is about 110 acres planted and producing. We're sitting in front of about 12 more that we planted last fall, and I've got 10 more planted that I'm planting in the next month.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what are the various grapes that you have planted here?
Backing up just one thing, and then for a total production of roughly 20,000 cases. Yeah. Obviously, Pinot Noir, flagship varietal in the Willamette Valley. Pinot Gris, Chardonnay. We've picked some this morning. It's just absolutely stunning and gorgeous fruit. I'm happy to make wine out of this. And Pinot Blanc. And I've got 1 acre of Syrah and 1 acre of Viognier. I feel like I'm forgetting something, but no, that's pretty much it. Yeah.
And what are some of the markets that you're selling your wine in?
Left Coast distributes nationally in probably 30 to 34 states. It's hard to keep track of. And we've also got a good market in British Columbia and throughout Quebec and Toronto and Alberta. They're burgeoning markets, but definitely BC and Quebec have been a lot of fun.
Wow. Mm-hmm. So tell me, what is your first memory relevant to wine?
That's a great question. And I've got a great answer. When do we start remembering? I was probably 5 years old, and it was like, what were those wines that were around the house, like Lancers and Blue Nun and stuff? I don't know the answer you wanted, but that's the farthest back memory I have, for sure.
Obviously, your parents were drinking it.
Yes.
So what is the first or most memorable wine you drink?
The wine that got me out here, I can say that. It was a bottle of... I believe it was an 84 Irie Reserve Pinot Noir, and I had it back around 95. At the time, I think it was called the Oregon Wine Advisory Board, had one of their big first national marketing pushes, and they went out and they visited, I think it was like New York and Chicago, and Aspen is where I found them at. And I sat and we did a little 2-day Oregon session where I listened, we ate, we drank, we were taught about the soils and the climates of the Willamette Valley, and that bottle of Irie actually got me to go to that seminar. And then after sitting at that seminar for about 2 days, in a nutshell, that's kind of how I even got out to Oregon. We just sort of packed it up and wanted to check this place out.
What were you doing prior to that?
Wine sales.
Oh, okay. So
yeah.
You were in the wine business.
Kinda. I was 21 years old, and I'd moved to Aspen to snowboard. Made some friends, snow melted, didn't want to leave, got a job at a wine shop. Yeah, that's and here I am, 23 years later.
All kind of worked out for the best.
Yeah.
So amongst all the populations, who do you think drinks the best wines in terms of quality?
I'll tell you, I would say that's a really loaded question. But anyway, I had a lot of fun in the south of France recently, and it's wonderful wine. I kind of even equate it to like Central Coast bigger reds. except they're cheap and affordable and just as good. So I think these people have it down. It was just amazing to me that the quality of wine you can get for 8 or 10 euros in the south of France.
Yeah. So traveling the world abroad and having been in the south of France, what would you say the best foreign wine you've ever drunk was?
Another trick question.
So many good wines out there.
Yeah, absolutely. More recently, I would just say the wines that I tasted in Sancerre were just amazing. And I had I don't know that we get what I tasted out there, and so I was just blown away and didn't have many expectations as a result of what we get out here. What I tried, I finally got out there and visited and started tasting around, and I was blown away.
Do you have a cellar that you collect wine in?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What would you say is giving you the most satisfaction in your cellar right now?
Aged wines. Yeah. Wine, to me, is in its infancy, or let's say in the first 5 or 6 years in the bottle, just fermented grape juice. And I think that the beauty of wine really comes out and shows itself after it's been in the bottle for 10, or if you're lucky enough, 20 or 25 years. And I've been collecting now for 23 years, and I still have those wines, and they're wonderful. They're better than ever.
What kind of wines would we find in your cellar?
Oh, it's a hot mess of Oregon Pinot, of course. Yeah, but I've done a lot of trading, so that it's not all the wines that I've made. In fact, I often try and trade at least half of what I produce and get a feel for what my friends and neighbors are doing. And then it's just so Pinot-centric. So even, there's a lot of Burgundy, there's a lot of New Zealand, there's a lot of California, especially like in the Sonoma coast and higher elevation. I love the, Santa Cruz Mountains and, Calera wines. I mean, all that high elevation or cooler climate California stuff is fantastic. And I do have a lot of that.
A real Pinophile.
Yeah.
So, on that note, do you think there's a such thing as a perfect variety?
Yeah, I do. Pinot Noir Chardonnay.
So, what do you think about wine critics and scores?
I don't know many wine critics personally, so I couldn't say. But to the scores, I think they're very helpful, and we're lucky enough to have a great quiver of scores, and it just makes things a lot easier. When we're selling wine, we're employing more people, we're employing better practices in the winery and in the vineyard, and as a result, it's just exponentially. You just keep getting better and better. So it is important. It seems to drive quality overall and over the long term.
Mm-hmm. So getting down to wine as a consumer, what do you prefer, red, white, or rosé?
It just depends who I'm with. Right now, Allison, I think you and I could kill a bottle of rosé for sure. It's that kind of day, right?
Yes.
It's just 82 degrees, sunny. We're outside. It's gorgeous. So I'm just like my surroundings, the food, the atmosphere, whatever. Every wine has a time and a place.
Fair enough. I fully agree. What about sparkling or still wine?
Overall, still. Yeah.
Okay. And for sparkling, if you have to go down that path, which I know is not hard to ask, but would it be champagne or sparkling wine from somewhere else?
Gotcha. Another good question. It's champagne. Yeah.
Okay.
Grower champagne. Yeah.
So you were talking before that it really is about a place and a time and what your mood is, what the food is. So how do you feel about food and wine pairing? Do you think there's a hard and fast rule about how to pair white wine with fish, red wine with meat, or do you think kind of rules go out the door? How do you approach that?
I'm really terrible at it. I am. And I know this because, again, traveling abroad, in the old world, it is done so effortlessly and so beautifully. Mm-hmm. And I've not witnessed that anywhere domestically.
We'll keep trying.
Yeah.
So I know that working in the wine industry, we have a tendency sometimes to drink a little too much. You and I have been at wine festivals and had a little too much to drink. So how do you deal with hangovers the next day?
Well, I avoid them. I just turned 46, and you can't do that anymore.
Sometimes it sneaks up on you.
Yeah.
So what do you think that a non-drinker loses out by not drinking your wine?
Just celebrating with friends, I mean, it's the drink is just a vector for, having, like-minded people around you and conversation flowing. And so I'm sure there are other ways to do that, but man, it sure works for our industry really well.
Fully agree with you. So if space aliens were to land on your property and you were to give them a wine from your cellar, what wine would that be?
A wine from my cellar. How about a brandy made from my wine from my cellar? How's that? Yeah, let's just cut to the chase.
Do you make brandy from your wine?
I did for years. Yeah, probably between the years of now not legally, but 03. Gosh, what do I do? Probably 03, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I did brandies. Wow. And I've still got the 7, 8, and 9 are aging. Yeah.
Wow. So we're in the middle of harvest here. It's another vintage, and I'm curious. We always say that each vintage tells a different story. I think you would agree with that. Do you think there are more things that repeat themselves or the opposite any given year?
Right. And I'm sure a lot of appellations and throughout domestically and internationally say they have vintages. But the Willamette Valley in Oregon truly does have vintages. That's why I'm here. Every single year is not like another. This is, I think, my 23rd harvest. And there are aspects maybe on the front end or the back end or maybe in the middle, because, a harvest that consists of 3, there's always the early fruit, the perfect fruit, and the late fruit. And at least, again, in the Willamette Valley in Oregon, there are aspects, like I was saying, of vintages that maybe remind me of others, but ultimately, as a whole, everyone has been completely different, and it just keeps you on your toes. You cannot, if you for any moment think that everything's great, you're not doing your job. You need to get out there in the vineyard and just keep tasting, keep looking, and figuring things out.
So, do you have any good luck rituals for when harvest is about to start?
Oh, no, not really. I'm just a stickler for making sure that every, wheel is greased, and we've gone through all our equipment, tractors and winery equipment, vineyard equipment. It's just, I guess that's just kind of what I do before a vintage. I make sure that I don't want anything breaking, and now's not the time.
That sounds like a ritual to me.
I think.
Do you capture any omens or signs each year that will predict the outcome of a harvest?
No. Sunshine.
And, they say a lot of times producers will walk through the cellars and talk to their wines. Do you go through the cellar, talk to your wine? And if so, or at any point, from the vines to the cellar, what do you say to your wine?
Well, I don't verbally, mentally. Well, it's just, when everything's right, when everything's happy, when everything's synergistic and working, you can smell it. As soon as you walk through the cellar door in the morning, your nose will take you somewhere, whether it's good or whether it's bad, and then it's something that needs to be corrected or allowed to follow through. And so I don't talk so much as listen. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm sure the wine appreciates that you listen to it. So when you were little, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I grew up in Burbank, California, and I spent a lot of time as a teenager and a young adult in the High Sierra working for a land management company. Anyway, I was absolutely blown away by the work that the Edison crew guys were doing up in the High Sierras, moving water and feeding Los Angeles water. And so I was going to school to become a hydrologist, and I wanted to work in the High Sierra for the Edison company. And I met my wife up there, and we drove away from all that.
And I would next ask, when you're not working, how do you spend your free time? Obviously, you were a snowboarder living in Aspen. What do you do now that you're here in Oregon in your free time?
Well, in the last 4 years, Dad. So I was really naive in thinking that I would be anything but 100% Dad, at least for these beginning years. Do a lot of mountain biking. That I raced as well, and that took up a lot of my time. And that evolved into trail running because it was so much easier with a child. You just step out the front door and go. And I live in a forest, and there are trails all around, so really easy to do. And also I got into fishing in the Willamette Valley in Oregon, and on the coastal range in Oregon. We have 4 seasons of big fish: fall Chinook and spring Chinook and winter steelhead and summer steelhead. And I really got in and geeked out with that for a long time.
Fascinating. Outdoor stuff. And so when you have those romantic evenings with your wife, what is the wine that you would order?
It's evolved. So now, tonight, probably a bottle of Alsace. Yeah.
It's a good way to start the night.
Yeah.
So what is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Great question. Pause it for a while. I was going to take a while to think about. Back to just listening and paying attention to the vintage and the wines you're making that year. We only get to, if we're lucky, get to do this maybe a couple dozen times in our life, and then we're done. We can't just do over a vintage, or brew, that beer and, again and again and again until we get it right. Mm-hmm. So, just not taking it lightly and just really, really put that into perspective. It was like, we don't have a lot of time to figure this out. In fact, if we're lucky, we won't even the vineyards we plant we'll only see a few of them even truly mature in our winemaking life. So just that. Yeah.
I think that sounds like good advice to give us.
Yeah.
As much as it is to take. So, what do you think to date your proudest achievement in your work is?
Where I'm at currently is this place is just amazing. We're on close to a 500-acre estate. 20 to 25% of the family's holdings here, they've given back to ecological compensation zones. So we've just got, a lot of acreage in oak savanna, and just that we have, so much environmental consciousness and in a place where we can actually grow great wine grapes and follow through with wines, and just being able to work here, being able to manage 110 acres of an all-inclusive, all-estate producing vineyard and winery. It just blows me away every day. All morning I've just been sampling and driving around and tasting and listening and figuring out tomorrow's picks. And it's really the culmination of everything to date's here now. It's awesome.
It's fantastic. So I want you to complete the sentence. A table without wine is like...
A table without wine. I couldn't even imagine. Yeah, how's that?
That's fair enough. So, do you think we'll be drinking wine in 100 years, 200 years, 500 years, 1,000 years from now? And if so, do you have a feeling of what we'll be drinking?
Absolutely. Hopefully it's not replicated, but Star Trek joke. Yeah. But what will we be drinking? Really fundamentally, nothing's changed in the last several hundred years. And we've tried a lot of things, but we always, kind of fall right back into place with, the classics. That's fine with me.
So a VIP person, it can be from any walk of life, is photographed by a paparazzi in a restaurant. And on the table is one of your bottles of wine, sitting there in all its glory as this shot is taken. Who is that famous person you would like to have drinking your wine?
Great question. I would say, how about don't know, some cool old rocker like Iggy Pop or Wayne Coyne from the Flaming Lips, or I don't know. How's that?
That works. You're going to be ready for the game we play at the very end, which we're almost to. So, name 3 wines you would take with you to a deserted island or outer space. Like the 3 wines you'd want to have with you if you were in an isolated place.
Do tacos count?
Sure.
Tequila?
It's your fantasy world, but 3 wines.
Yeah. Great. Okay, so something I can't right now, but Alsatian. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And then I would say Burgundy and Chablis.
It's a nice little trio of wines there.
Yeah, just fine. I could do that forever. Yeah.
So, what is one winemaking area in the world that you would still like to visit and explore?
Boy, I haven't been to many places, so there's a lot. I've never been to Italy. In the places I've been, I want to go back to anyway. Yeah, I've spoken a couple times already about the Alsace region. I've never been, so that's next on the bucket list.
So the last thing before we finish is, because it's called Wine Soundtrack, we like to play a little game here where we, the correlation between wine and music. And so many times we drink wine and it makes us think of a mood, a song, or there are certain songs that conjure up what we want to drink. So based on who you would like the paparazzi to catch drinking your wine, I'm curious if you were drinking Alsatian wine, what is the music or what is the song you'd want to be listening to or makes you think of?
All morning I've been listening to Snoop Dogg. It's terrible.
So what would you want to drink with Snoop Dogg?
Right, yeah, totally. Or smoke, right? I think just a nice bottle of Oregon Pinot Noir.
I think that's a good answer. So I want to thank you for joining us today. And before we go, if you can just tell everyone just one more time where we can find Left Coast Estate and, can they visit here, and tell us a little bit about where we can find you online.
Yeah, so it's leftcoastestate.com, and the tasting room, of course, is open 7 days a week from 12 to 5, and the grounds are amazing. We've got a cafe and kitchen on site and hiking trails, so it's a destination, not just a tasting room. And like I'd mentioned, just ask your local retailer. We're in most of the states, so there's a good chance you'll find us.
Fantastic. Thank you, Joe. I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today, and have a great harvest.
Thanks very much. It was great.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.